What are my top 3 tips for somebody wanting to start a knife channel on YouTube? What's going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. I received this question on a video I did recently. Hopefully I'll post a clip of the question up at the top, but if I didn't, it was somebody asking if I could give my top 3 tips for somebody wanting to get into knife tubing. I love these kind of questions and I love doing these kind of videos. So let's get into it. To start off, let's do a little history on me. I've been doing videos for 15, 14, 13 years, something like that. Most of them have been knife related. I have veered off that course a handful of times, and believe me, I'm going to cover that as a tip. So I've learned a lot of lessons, and the first lesson I want to teach you is knowing what to do is the easiest part. Actually doing it day in and day out and sticking to the plan and being consistent, that's where the work is. So, the tips I'm giving in this video, I think are absolutely fantastic and will help you achieve success. However, it's the smallest part of the whole thing. Actually doing them and sticking to it day in and day out. That's where it gets difficult. So let's dive in, shall we? We're going to start with tip number 3, go down to number 1. I think number 1 is the most important. However, not by a great degree, but definitely the strongest of the 3 is there. So tip number 3, invest in your channel and monitor your progress. Some of these are going to be lumped together. I could probably take these tips and turn them into top 10 if I really wanted, but I don't want to do that. So we're going to stick to the 3, but there's kind of subparts and things to these tips. So invest in your channel. Buy good equipment, get some lighting, and purchase some editing software. Now, I want to caveat this. Don't go overboard. I guess if you're independently wealthy and you just have money to burn, do whatever you want. But here's how I'll phrase it. Unless you're going for a specific type of channel, which is the videographer type channel, and I'm going to cover that in tip number 1, but unless that's your goal, is to be heavy on that, and that's your passion, is creating a beautiful, robust video with editing and all these things, keep it reasonable, because buying expensive equipment, lighting, cameras, editing software, it won't make a bad channel good. It just won't. It won't make your channel inherently better. However, having really poor lighting, really poor video, really poor editing can hurt your channel. So it's kind of a complicated thing. You don't want it holding you back, but it's also not inherently the key to success. At the end of the day, you need to have a solid channel with solid content that is consistent. Did we just get out of focus there? That's weird. What's going on here? There we go. Speaking of which, cameras, right? That was a distraction because it decided to focus on some random weird thing and everything was out of focus. Having bad equipment and things like that can hold you back, but it's not going to make your channel good. Alongside of this, pay attention to metrics. When you upload a video, look at the stuff that YouTube provides. Look at your engagement. Look at your click-through rate. Look at how many people liked your video compared to watched it. Look at your average watch time. Don't get overly obsessed with it, but log this stuff in your mind and try to build a pattern of what does well, what doesn't do well. And along with that, interact with your viewers, post questions, respond to the things that they ask, their comments, respond to their comments, connect with them outside of the YouTube platform. Try to build some sort of community. It's time intensive, but it's kind of the whole point. So invest in your channel, both in terms of equipment as well as your time, and it'll help grow success. Now, none of this is like overnight stuff, right? It's not like you start doing this and 2 weeks later, you're going to blow up. Probably. I don't know. I guess if you're really, really good and you're doing something innovative and really exciting, maybe. But for us average folks that are kind of just grinding, these are things you just got to implement early and be consistent on. Tip number 2, define your scope of your channel. What is the subject matter of your channel? In this case, we're talking knives, but this applies to any channel. Talking knives, is that fixed blades? Is it custom knives? Is it production knives? Is it folding knives? Is it EDC gear? Is it more weapon based? Is it self-defense based? Or is it kind of camping and bushcrafting. Like, define the scope of your channel. Now, it doesn't have to be down to the T. It doesn't mean you can never feature anything outside of it, but you want to have a clear vision of what it is your channel is covering and try to stay within that as best you can. Now, there's some leeway and there's some expansion areas. You know, like, for example, I could throw in some EDC gear, content, you know, wallets, things like that here or there. My channel is primarily folding knives with an emphasis on autos and things like that. But I can certainly sprinkle in some other things. But what I wouldn't want to do is start posting some vlog videos about family vacation or food reviews or things like that. Unless your scope is lifestyle channel. So think Cutlery Lover, right? That's kind of what he does. If you subscribe to Jeff, you're not getting just knife reviews and things. You're kind of subscribing to his life. So if that's your scope, is your life, then that's fine. You just need to define what it is and stay consistent with it. Because what people don't like is when they think they've subscribed to one thing and all of a sudden they start getting other content consistently. They don't like that. They're going to unsubscribe. They're going to watch something else. So you just need to figure out what it is, the scope of your channel is, and kind of stick to it. Now, that doesn't mean you're locked in forever. You can change that, but it's a pretty big endeavor, and it takes a lot of effort to change that. And once again, you got to commit to that change in order for it to be successful. So define the scope. The number one topic, probably the one I'm going to spend the most amount of time on, I think, is what type of channel are you doing? And this is more of a conceptual type, right? This is outside of subject matter. This is outside of scope. This is what delivery type of channel you have here. And so some of the ones I want to mention, some of the different types I want to kind of bring up here is not exhaustive. There's all kinds of types of channels. There's little nuances and things like that. But I'm going to define the three main ones that apply to knife channels in my opinion. And like I said, there's subtypes and things like that. Number one is the videographer. I'm going to mention that one first because we touched on it before. So that type of channel has a focus on visuals, right? Amazing lighting, amazing video, amazing editing, slow-mo, fast-mo, things like that. The primary goal of that is to be visually appealing, right? So think, for example, taking this knife right here, this Phoenix from Spyderco, oddball knife, and I could show this thing in different settings and kind of how the light is dancing off of it in a beautiful fashion, and then maybe take it and do some cutting, right? And at the end of the day, on paper, you could say, oh, you just showed a knife and did some cutting. But the way it's shot and edited with the music and everything, it would be a visual and auditory treat. In order to be successful at that, though, you have to be really good at it, and you have to invest in all the equipment, and it has to be your passion to do that right. You can't just take this thing and shoot it with your iPhone and do some cutting and throw some slow-mo on it and have it be successful. It has to really be something special. You have to have an eye and an artistic flair for that. So that's a very kind of specific subgroup of videos that you can get into. But I would say it needs to start with the passion, the artistic passion, and the videographer passion first before you even decide the subject matter that you're trying to do. This blade is just really catching my eye the way the light hits it. You can see those grind lines on there on that compound grind. Sorry, squirrel. I just got a little distracted there with this this Plexus here. Is that the name? Plexus? Think so. Yes, sorry, don't quote me on that. So, videographer channel, back on track. Another type that is very popular, and I think a lot of people just kind of inherently start with this type, is the basic reviewer/user, right? The objective reviewer. That's how I started 15 years ago or whatever. I started off, it might be hard to believe, with all the bias and the goofy jokes and things I do now. I started off as a very unbiased knife reviewer. I kept my personality as best I could out of it. I would purchase production knives and I would do objective reviews of those knives. Is it worth your money? Does it do what it advertises? Do I think it's quality? Does it function? Things like that. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of that's where they need to start their channel. Now, it is a good base to kind of figure things out, get some opinions, figure out what you want to do. But ideally, if you can define the type of channel you want from the beginning, just starting with that will kind of get you ahead. So the Reviewer user, right? They primarily focus on knives that are attainable by a reasonable amount of people. They tend to focus on knives that are kind of newer, if they can, right? Newer on the scene that people need reviews on. And they try to objectively review these knives and give their opinion on them if they're of value and things like that. So think kind of Nick Shabazz for the most part. Now, he is very strong on personality, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but at his core, he's primarily an objective reviewer. He takes knives that have come out and he does kind of his opinion on if they're good, if they're valuable, things like that. And he doesn't really put a lot of his own personal opinion, right? He doesn't say, this thing is so cool looking, it's totally awesome, I love the way this looks. He doesn't focus on aesthetics so much, and it's mainly usage and things like that. Now, I would say that the tricky part with that one is I feel like that sort of video was more needed in the past than it is now, for a couple reasons, and I've touched on this before, I won't dwell on it, but knives have gotten so good that most of them will work, right? Most of them will work, and most of them are reasonably well executed. And so when you're doing reviews on modern knives, you're really talking about kind of the nitty-gritty details, which is fine, right? But it's just not as impactful as I feel it used to be. Back in the day, when I was doing those kind of videos, knives could be utter crap. They could not function. Locks could fail. They could not flip. Heat treats were way off. And so having somebody do this for you was a much needed service. On top of the fact that this kind of stuff just wasn't out there back then. You know, companies, manufacturers weren't on these platforms. Spyderco was not doing YouTube videos. Kershaw was not doing YouTube videos. Retailers were not doing these videos. And so there was a huge need for somebody to come in and showcase these things because you just didn't have any other information. The only thing you could get was in like Blade magazine, if Spyderco paid to have an article written for them, which was essentially just an advertisement for the knife, right? It was hard to get unbiased reviews and overviews, and that's not a problem now. These companies have people that show these knives and give the information on them. Now, they're not going to say the knife is bad if they work for the company, but they'll at least talk about the features and the cost and things like that. And then on top of it, too, there's just so many knives out there. It's hard to be effective with investing huge amounts of testing and things on these knives because most people are already on to the next release by the time you even get your video published. We just don't have as many flagship releases as we used to. Back in the day, this will be the last thing I say about this. Back in the day, knife releases were few and far between, and so we had time to really chew on them and say, is this good? You know, and do heavy testing, and is it worth your money? Now, every week, there's just more and more and more being pumped out, which is great for cost and variety, but people just don't seem to be as invested in specific releases and models as much as they used to. But anyways, so yeah, reviewer, user, this includes like bushcrafting, fixed blades, you know, testing steels, things like that. You can focus on sub aspects like steel composition, sharpening, kind of like Neeves Knives does a lot. You can kind of dive into these specific things and be more of a tester type channel, which is very, very noble and needed. The third type, which is the one that I feel like I fit into more now, you know, to varying degrees, is a personality channel, right? Where it's the primary focus is, yeah, you do some reviewing, you point some things out, but for the most part, you're trying to just be entertaining, right? You're trying to build relationships. You're trying to add in some humor, some clever things, maybe impart some wisdom that you have for being in the community, things like that. And I just enjoy that type of video more. I enjoy watching that type of video, and I enjoy trying to produce that type of video. By no means am I saying I'm doing an amazing job at it. I'm just saying that's kind of what my focus has been over the last number of years, is just trying to focus on interesting things or things I find interesting and trying to deliver them in a somewhat, as best I can, entertaining way. Now, the focus on that channel, though, or that type of channel, is to be really successful at it, you have to be inherently interesting. You know, think Metal Complex, right? Why is he so popular? He has a very unique voice, both in terms of physical voice, like his actual octaves. He has a very interesting sounding voice, like literally very interesting sounding voice, very good cadence of voice, up pitches, down pitches, pauses. Like he's really good at delivering his personality on top of just having a strong personality. The things that he finds interesting and funny, the way he's able to predict what people might be commenting or saying in relation to what he's talking about. It's a skill set talking to a camera, right? You don't have the interactive nature of seeing somebody's face, right? So if you're trying to explain a concept when you're talking to someone, you can kind of see them drift off, and you might say, ooh, I need to punch this up. I need to speed this up. I need to make it more interesting. Or they're not getting it. I need to reiterate. When you're just talking to a camera, you have to kind of guess how people are reacting to what you're saying. Is it clear? Did it come across? Are you saying the same thing 4 different times and that's going to piss them off? Did that joke land? Did they get it? You have no idea. You're talking to a camera, and then you're going to upload it. And even when they watch it and leave comments, you're still not completely clear on how effective your voice and communication was. So there is an inherent skill there, but it's definitely something you can improve. And one way I would recommend improving it is just watch your videos, especially older videos when it's not fresh in your mind and you're not filling in the gaps yourself, right? So take videos you uploaded a month, 2 months, 3 months ago. Watch those. Objectively, as best you can, try to say, was this entertaining? Was it clear? Did it make sense? Did these jokes land? Was there things that were annoying in that video? And then try to correct those. So that is my top 3 tips. Most of these apply to any sort of content. Aside from, honestly, no. I think really these could apply to any sort of subject matter that you're wanting to do videos on. They're fairly vague. None of these are specific to knives, which I hope is what you were looking for. But yeah, comment down below if you think these tips are of any value. I really appreciate your opinion. I will catch you on the next video. You guys take care. I'm out.